Hello, RSU faculty. This is Troy Gerard, your instructional designer. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through gradable items in Blackboard coming up. Now, before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this video is going to cover gradable items in Blackboard and the various settings that you have within those items. For other helps, tips, and tricks on the gradebook, how the gradebook is handling these assignments, how the gradebook calculates these assignments, be sure to check out my other videos on my channel. To get started with the gradable item settings, I've created examples of each of the gradable items. Just know that if you are wanting to add any one of these to your course, you simply find where there's a purple plus sign, click that, and hit create. These gradable items are going to be in the form of assessments or participation or engagement. We have tests, assignments, discussion, and journals. First, let's take a look at the discussion gradable item. This can be found in our course content or under its own tab at the very top titled discussions. The discussions actually live, or any gradable item for that matter, live in the gradebook. But discussions are very unique because they have their own tab, and you can choose to only display them on this page, or we can choose to display them within the course content. We will see this when we get to the discussion settings. So let me go ahead and open up this discussion. We can see that we have content over on the left. These are the instructions, how to complete this discussion. These are the things that you're wanting your students to respond to. We can edit any of this content by finding the three dots or the ellipsis over here in this discussion box. We can then edit our content, and our students are going to simply respond to our discussion by clicking into this box and start to type, or they can add a file by inserting or an attachment. They can add a link of any kind. So that's how they're actually going to respond to our discussion. In order for us to set up our discussion that students can participate in, we want to take a look at the discussion settings over here on the right. By clicking this gear icon, we can now edit the settings in this side menu. The very first setting is the display in the content page. So this is the setting I was saying where you want to only show it on your discussion tab and not actually in your course content. So going back to the course content page itself, if you are in a module and you know that you have a discussion out here, but you can't seem to find it, most likely it's going to be in the discussion page itself, and that setting is not selected. So be sure to go into the settings and select to display it on the course content page. The next setting is post first. This is going to allow students to post their original response to the discussion before they're actually seeing other responses in the form of your response to other students or other students' responses. The next item is making this discussion a gradable item. Do we actually want to have this discussion post be a part of our grade or total grade in the course or not? If we want to simply have a participation in the discussion, we can deselect this, and you can see that our due dates and our points goes away. So if we are seeing that we have a discussion, but it's not showing up in our gradebook for whatever reason, it's not being calculated in the total calculation, we want to make sure that this setting is selected. Once it is selected, the participation in the grade, the due dates, the points, the letter, the percentage, and the points given are now editable. If you're not seeing those, it's because the grade discussion setting is not selected. Going to the bottom, you can see that we have additional tools. We can have a grading rubric specific to this discussion. We can add one here under this grade rubric link. We can have a goals or standard, and this is specifically to the general education goals that the school has set for our institution. So we can add one of these goals. Currently, the settings aren't really built out right now, but as we get farther into the future using this Blackboard Ultra, I know that we will have these grades and standards available. The next thing is we can actually assign this to a particular student group. These student groups are actually built within our roster, within the settings of our course, and we can simply assign only this discussion to a particular group. This is a good setting if you have multiple groups in your course, whether they have a project that they're working on and you want them to discuss various items within that project only with the people in their group. You can do that and you can separate them by the student groups. So very straightforward. Discussions have some of the most easiest settings in the setups that we have here in Gradable Items in Blackboard. You will see updates in the future for multiple due dates, whether it's a post first by this date and reply by this date. Blackboard has told us about these updates. They have not yet released the time of when that's going to be available, but just be watching for that and you will see these settings pop up here in the discussion settings. Next, we're going to talk about the gradable item journal entries. Before we do, I wanted to talk about the differences between discussions and journal entries. Discussions are more of a class conversation taking place about a topic that you've given them in the prompt. Journal entries are entries that they are writing about their self-reflection. Maybe they are tracking their own progress throughout a course. Maybe they have some kind of field work or clinical work that they are doing and they need to reflect on that day, the tasks at hand. So that is when we are wanting to use the journal entry. It's more of a conversation between the individual student and the instructor. Moving into the journals, we can see on the left, we have the journal prompt, and on the right, we have the settings, very similar to any one of these gradable items. We can add a prompt by clicking the ellipsis and hit edit, and we have a full editable text box here. We can edit the title of this. We can add attachments. We can add links. We can add videos. But keep in mind that this is more of a prompting the individual student to reflect on what they are doing in their course, out there in the field, that sort of thing, a conversation between you and your student. Over here in the settings, we can see that by default, it is not a gradable item. So that means that it is not being accounted for in the overall grade. If we want to, we can select this, and it also gives us the participation and the grade, the due dates. What are we seeing as far as percentage points or letter? How many points are we giving them? And it also has a grading rubric associated with that. Journal entries, unlike discussions, are very simple. They only have due dates, grades, and points. We can allow users to edit or delete entries, and we can also allow users to edit and delete comments. So that is a comment that you have made on that particular journal entry. We can also allow other students to comment on these journal entries, but again, mainly it's for the conversation to take place between the instructor and the student. Once we have set all of our settings here, we can hit save, and now it is reflected in our journal settings on the right. Next, we're going to take a look at assignments and tests. Note that assignments and tests are actually the same type of gradable item. And when you are wanting to add one to your course, you find the plus sign, you hit create. You will see that we have tests and assignments in this pop-up window. But note that they are actually the same type of gradable item. I'll show you that in the settings here. If we go into this example assignment, we can see that we have content over here on the left and the assignment settings on the right. If we click our gear icon, this is knowing that it's an assignment based on the category that we've given it. We've clicked it on the example assignments. It says assignment content here. It also says assignment settings here. But if I wanted to make this a homework assignment, I can change the category and hit save. And now you will see that the title is changed to homework settings, homework content, and we will manually have to change this to homework or quiz or test. So in the assignment or the test, we have the same exact settings, and we can distinguish the difference between a test and assignment homework based on the category. So I know that this says example test, it says test content, test settings. If I want to make this a quiz, I can make this a quiz by changing the category and hit save. And now this becomes a quiz. It's reflected as a quiz in our gradebook. It's reflected as a quiz in the title. We can simply change the editable title of this item and we can move forward. So note that the only difference between assignments and tests within the selection option is the default category for assignments are assignments, and the default category for tests are tests. At any time, we can change the category of these items to make them a different item within our gradebook. So I will go back to this example assignment. We have labeled it a homework. Adjust that back to an assignment and hit save. We can see that it changes those settings, and it also changes the icon associated with assignments within Blackboard. Now let's take a look at the individual settings within the content and the gradebook settings over here on the right-hand side. First, the assignment content is made up of the editable blocks that you see. We can change any one of these blocks or add one of these blocks by the icons viewed in this content area. We can simply select the ellipsis and hit edit. We can then edit the content. We can add links. We can attach files. We can do what we want here in this assignment area. The other thing that we can do in this assignment area or this content is we can add questions of our own, whether that's from a question pool or a test bank that we've put in. We can add formula. We can add calculating by just numerical questions. We can have essay questions, fill in the blank, matching, multiple choice, true and false. Or if we have another question somewhere else in our course that we've created within this question editor, we can actually reuse questions. Maybe it's a standard question that we want through all of our quizzes. We can then allow that to happen by reusing the question. We can add texts, local files, and we can also upload a file from our cloud storage. So all of these settings are found in the purple plus sign within the assignment content area. If we wanted to add a true or false question, we go and find the true and false question, and now we have the ability to edit that question, put how many points it's worth, what is the correct answer, do we want automated feedback, and we can hit save. I'm going to hit cancel for now. I'm going to re-show these settings when we take a look at the test settings or the quiz settings. So just know that the content is here. Students can then answer that question if it is prompted here in those editable questions, or they're going to submit their answer via this drop box. They can add text, images, and files in this submission box here. Looking at the settings for this, we'll go back up to the top. We'll hit the gear icon on the right-hand side. We now have the standard due dates. We can prohibit late submissions. We can prohibit late attempts or new attempts after the due date. We can see that these are grayed out because it says that there's a progress in attempt. This is actually our student view making this attempt. Here we can also add a due date that will allow these to be populated. So now we can select to prohibit a new attempt after the due date. You will actually find that there are a lot of settings that are grayed out depending on how you have your assignment set up. So we didn't have a due date here, so it's going to prohibit a late submission because it doesn't know what late is. We can allow class conversations. So that is a setting that we can have the students communicate back and forth on their submissions on this assignment, more of a comment section on the assignment itself. That's defaulted to being deselected. We also have display one question at a time, randomized question, randomized answer. You can see that these are grayed out, specifically because we do not have a created question here over in the content. So if I went and I created that true or false here, and we can just do testing, the answer is true, and we hit save. Now in our settings, we can actually see display one question at a time. If I have multiple questions, you will see randomized question and randomized answer. So you're actually able to access these settings based on the content of your actual assignment. I'm going ahead and delete this. We can go back into our settings and see that it is disabled. One thing that you can do if you're wanting to build out a course specifically for on-ground, where you're not going to have anything submitted online, you can actually select this collect submissions offline. When we do and hit save, it's going to tell the students that, hey, this is an offline assignment. You must turn in something in person. It also deactivates the submission box down here at the bottom. So we can go back into the settings. We can disable that, hit save, and now our submission box at the bottom is now available. Going back to the settings, we can see that our grade category is available. We have multiple attempts, 1 through unlimited. We can view or display the grade using points, percentage, or letter. And we can have maximum points for this assignment. We can have anonymous grading, so we can hide students. If you have a student worker of some kind that you're having them grade for you, then we can hide the students. They just simply go through and grade, not knowing who the student is. We can have evaluation options here, 2 graders per student. That say we have multiple sections, and we have multiple instructors, or maybe we have peer review, so students can then see other student submissions and they can review them. That's an option that we have. And then also assessment grade. This has to do with those graded questions that we have built over here on the left. We can post assessment grades automatically. This is a new feature that Blackboard has. Once it is graded, it will automatically post the grade, where you don't have to go back in and post it after it's graded. Assessment results, we can see that we have submission view, we have automated question feedback, question scores, and correct answers. You can see that these are not editable at this time because we have the no graded questions over here on the left. I will look at this further when we take a look at test and quiz settings. Next, we have assessment security. We can lock this assignment where the students have to have a code to get in. We can provide that student with the code before they are actually attempting the assignment. This is a way to kind of filter who's going in and out of that assignment, when they're able to start it. Do they have prerequisite assignments before they can attempt this? And that prerequisite assignment gave them the code. The next thing we have is additional tools. We have time limitation that's based on how long it's going to take for the student to actually attempt this assignment. We have gradable rubrics. I have another video specifically about rubrics on my channel. Go ahead and check that out when you can. We have goals and standards. Those are those goals and standards set by the institution themselves. We can assign this to student groups, just as we did with our discussion settings. And the last one, and most important, is our originality report. We have the option to enable safe assign within our assignments. If we click on safe assign and enable this, this is our plagiarism checker, our turnitin.com, if you will. Each assignment can have its own safe assign enabled or disabled, so you can have it individually set. We can allow students to view the Safe Assign or originality report after their attempt. So when they submit their assignment, they can see how much of it was plagiarized, and it will actually allow them to see what was plagiarized and how they can change it to better their submission. So I like to select this and have students see that report. The other setting is here is excluding the submission from the institution and global reference database. We're going to leave that deselected. We want to evaluate it to other submissions. This is going to help our originality report see if it's been plagiarized through the global Safe Assign settings and our institution. If a student has submitted the same paper multiple times in different classrooms, we can actually check that here. So those are the two that are important for this. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And at the bottom, you can see that it is enabled. And that, again, is our plagiarism checker. We want to add that to each and every assignment that will have some kind of submission for that student. Lastly, we have the description. And again, this is just an optional description. What is this assignment? This is where I would suggest to put your student learning outcomes or your course learning objectives here. You can kind of map that through maybe quality matters, wants those to be viewable as you go through their course. This is where we can add that. And when you hit save, that discussion actually pulls up right here, as well as the pop-up menu that the students see when they access the assignment for the first time. Lastly, we want to take a look at the example test that I have here. This is just to simulate a test or a quiz, some kind of assessment that you're giving your students. Again, all of the settings are the same for assignments or tests, depending on what category it's filed in. So I'll go ahead and open up this example test. You can see that I have changed it to quiz. So I would want to change the editable title up here to quiz. Again, under the settings, you can change the category here to make it a test, a quiz, an exam. These categories are editable in the gradebook. I have more videos on that. Just know that you can change whether it's an assignment, a test, or quiz in the category itself. Whether it's an assignment, a test, a quiz, an exam, any kind of gradable item, we can have editable questions that students will answer right here on the page versus having to submit something in the text box based on adding these to our content area. We can find a purple plus sign and add any of the following like we have already gone through. But just note that I have two true and false questions here. They're 10 points each. I have the text up at the top and the answers. You can see in the instructor view, I can see which one is correct. If we are building these questions out based on test banks or question pools, we can add a question pool. Be sure to check out my video about test banks and question pools. It goes more in depth on how you can edit questions within that pool, how you are actually telling what students are seeing in the test itself, how many questions they have, what kind of feedback they're having based on those questions. So that's question pools. Check out my video on question pools itself. Once we have questions in this content area, we want to go up to our settings and make sure that our settings are reflecting if we want random questions, random answers, how many attempts we want. I can say that we have 3 attempts and hit save. And now we can go and back into our attempts here. We can see that we have, display question at one time. We have our category. What attempt out of the 3 are we taking? Is it the average of all of them? Is it the first attempt? Is it the highest last attempt with a grade? That one's pretty good for if you have 3 attempts, the student only took 2, they're in the middle of the 3rd one, and we have it where it will automatically submit after the due date. So that's the actual default setting. I always say make sure that you accept the highest grade. That's kind of the standard across academia, but any one of these are acceptable according to your course setup. We then have points. percentage or letter, you can see that the maximum points are grayed out. That's specifically because we have 2 questions over here in the actual quiz itself that's dictating what points are being calculated. I have 2 questions at 10 points each, so the maximum points are 20 points. If you're having difficulty adjusting the points, know that the points are actually calculating based on your settings on the individual question itself. If I wanted to make this assignment worth 30 points, I would want to make each one of these worth 15 points at the actual question itself. Hit save, and we can see that our maximum points are now 30. We go into our settings. We can see it's still grayed out, but maximum of 30. So that has everything to do with having the editable questions over here in the content area. We have anonymous grading. We have evaluation options for peer review. But I wanted to take a look at the assessment results. You can see now we have submission view. We have automated question feedback. We have question score and correct answers. Any one of these links are going to allow us to go into this menu. We can see that we can allow students to view their submission after a certain particular period of time. Individual grades are posted after the due date or just after the submission. That's the default there. We can have submission feedback. Do we want to show them the feedback on a specific date so we can have the correct answer given to them? Down here, we can have the automatic feedback given it to down here, or we can simply give them the grade of their submission. On all 3 dates, we can have individual dates for any one of those settings. We can then show them the correct answer in a particular window. So I can say specific date. This is the date that I want to show them the correct answer versus the question score versus the feedback versus the actual submission itself. So after I feel like these are the ones that I want, I can hit save. And now that is actually reflected in the assessment results categories. So that's pretty much the only difference between an assignment and a test. We have gradable items here or editable questions over here in the content, and we have results being dictated under these settings over here. All the rest, whether it's a plagiarism checker of the safe assign, the groups, the time limit, the accessibility versus the code, giving them the code, prohibit late submission, all of that is going to be the same as it is for the assignment itself. I can hit save, making sure that all of these items are now saved. The last and final step to making sure that the students have access to all of these gradable items is to make it viewable or visible to the student. You can see that all 4 of these are hidden to the student. That means it's not going to show up in their content area. It's not going to show up in their gradebook. It's excluding it from the gradebook at that time. So you want to make sure that you're actually making it visible to the student. Under release conditions, I have an entire video explaining the different types of release conditions. This is the availability of the assessment or assignment discussion, the gradable item. Be sure to check out my other video specifically related to availability of assignments and gradable items. So we want to make this visible to the student. We click visible, visible, and now in the student view, or the students can see both of these items, not only in the content area, but in the gradebook itself. I hope this video was helpful. If you need any additional help with your Blackboard course, feel free to reach out to me or go to help.blackboard.com. Thanks for watching.